Okay, let's unpack this deep dive. Today, we're setting our sights on, well, a scattering of islands in the vast Indian Ocean, the nation of Seychelles.
Hmm.
You might look at its size on a map and wonder, but this archipelago, made up of 115 islands, holds a surprisingly outsized significance on the global stage.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's particularly true when we examine its long-standing and evolving relationship with India.
Yeah, it's really a classic example of how geography can be destiny or, at least a powerful shaper of international relations for a rising maritime power like India.
Well, understanding and nurturing relationships in strategically vital island nations like Seychelles isn't just beneficial.
No.
It's pretty much essential for its security and influence in the Indian Ocean region.
Absolutely. And for this exploration, we've had the chance to dig into some source material you've provided, which offers, a really detailed look at the history, the key ties, and sort of the notable events shaping the bond between India and Seychelles.
That's right. Our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the absolute core insights from that material, the historical context, the pivotal defense cooperation, the strategic agreements, and explain why they are so important, kind of cutting through the noise to get to the most salient points.
Yeah, we're aiming to give you the shortcut, basically, to being well informed on this specific but, highly illustrative relationship. It's a bond that started taking shape a long time ago, really intertwined with Seychelles' own journey through its colonial past and into independence.
So let's begin by laying that historical groundwork then. The material points out that Seychelles spent, well, a significant period under British rule.
That's right. It became a British colony all the way back in 1794. And for over a century, it wasn't administered as a distinct entity either, which is interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from 1794 right through to 1903, the British governed Seychelles from the larger nearby colony of Mauritius. It was only after 1903 that it actually gained the status of a separate British colony, getting its own direct administration, though, still under colonial power, of course.
That long period of being governed indirectly from Mauritius, that must have shaped its early identity and administration differently, I imagine, than a directly ruled colony. Took over 100 years just to get its own dedicated colonial administration.
Yeah, it's quite a stretch of time.
And then eventually, like many nations globally, Seychelles gained independence.
Yes, that key moment came in 1976. And what's particularly striking, according to the material, is that India didn't wait around at all.
Ooh.
India established diplomatic relations with Seychelles in the very same year it became independent in 1976.
Nah.
This wasn't like a gradual recognition. It was an immediate, high-priority move by India to connect with this new sovereign state right as it entered the international system.
That immediacy really signals India's early recognition of Seychelles' potential importance, even back then, doesn't it?
Oh.
It wasn't just acknowledging a new country. It feels like a deliberate act, establishing a connection right at the outset.
It does. Very deliberate.
And that was quickly followed up with a physical presence, I assume.
Exactly. Just 3 years later, in 1979, India opened a diplomatic mission in Seychelles, so that further solidified the early ties, moving beyond just formal recognition to establishing, on-the-ground representation.
Right.
And to underscore that early importance, the material mentions a visit by then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1981.
Oh, okay.
Hosting a visit from a major country's head of government within, 5 years of independence, that's a strong indicator of mutual regard and strategic interest already.
So the foundation is built on this almost immediate post-independence connection, backed by swift diplomatic action and high-level political engagement. This historical context leads us directly then to what the source material identifies as the core pillar, the absolute most important component of the India-Seychelles relationship.
Without question, the material is very clear on this. Defense cooperation is the absolute cornerstone. It's not just one aspect among many. It's the primary driver and a central theme running through decades of this relationship, operating across multiple dimensions.
Okay, let's really dive into the specifics of this defense cooperation then. Where does India primarily focus its efforts? What does that look like?
Well, a major area, as the material highlights, is training and capacity building for the Seychelles People's Defense Forces, the SPDF.
Right, the SPDF.
And this isn't merely symbolic, it's a continuous structured program. SPDF contingents receive regular training in India, This training covers, both the theoretical knowledge required for modern defense and security operations, as well as crucial on-ground practical components.
So it's really about equipping Seychelles' own personnel
Exactly, giving them the skills and expertise they need to protect their nation.
and building that internal capability is vital, I'd imagine, especially in a region facing significant security challenges. The material points specifically to the threat of piracy, for example.
Piracy has been a persistent and frankly serious issue in the Western Indian Ocean, particularly off the coast of East Africa, and it really affects vulnerable island states like Seychelles with their huge maritime territories.
Yeah.
Seychelles, just by its location, is both exposed to this threat and critical to regional efforts to counter it. The material really emphasizes Seychelles' key role in the fight against piracy.
So India's defense assistance is directly geared towards helping Seychelles tackle this, among other threats. Is that the idea?
Precisely. The material details India's significant assistance in boosting Seychelles' counter-piracy capabilities, and this isn't just bilateral either. It fits into a broader picture of international cooperation. The material notes India's participation in a 25-nation combined task force related to piracy, even mentioning its connection to the coast of Bahrain, which sort of underscores the point that countering piracy is this wide-ranging international effort where countries like India contribute significantly. And this effort is highly relevant, obviously, to securing sea lanes and protecting vulnerable states in the Indian Ocean.
What's particularly insightful, I thought, is how Seychelles perceives India's role here. The material states that Seychelles views India as a stable and a non-threatening ally for maritime security. That specific language feels quite deliberate. What does that tell us about the nature of this partnership?
That phrasing is incredibly important, especially in a geopolitical context like the Indian Ocean. It's
Yeah.
a space where numerous global and regional powers have, competing strategic interests. Navigating this requires trust. So by being seen as stable, India projects reliability and consistency. And by being non-threatening, it suggests India's engagement isn't about imposing its will or establishing exclusive military dominance or, trying to control Seychelles' resources or sovereignty.
Right, it's not about domination.
Exactly. Instead, it implies a partnership built on mutual benefit, where India helps Seychelles enhance its own security and stability without demanding, undue concessions or control in return. This perception of India as a benign partner is a powerful asset in building lasting security ties.
And this trust has manifested in tangible, concrete support, hasn't it? Particularly in terms of providing actual assets.
Absolutely. The material gives clear examples. In 2009, for instance, when Seychelles needed help directly countering piracy, India responded by sending naval ships, specifically at Seychelles' request.
So they asked, India delivered.
Precisely. This wasn't some unsolicited intervention. It was a direct partnership in action. And even more significantly, India has actually gifted naval vessels to Seychelles, which is a substantial form of defense assistance.
Yeah, gifting ships seems like a major investment in another nation's defense capability. That's not insignificant.
It really is. In 2006, India gifted the INS Termugli, a patrol vessel, which was then inducted into the Seychelles fleet and renamed PS Topaz.
Okay, the Topaz.
Then later, in 2014, India gifted another ship, the INS Terrassa. The material notes that INS Terrassa was specifically intended for naval surveillance and patrolling.
Ah, surveillance. Key for them.
Absolutely. These vessels are, well, game changers for a small island nation. They allow the Seychelles Coast Guard and defense forces to significantly expand their operational reach, patrol their vast exclusive economic zone much more effectively, monitor maritime traffic, conduct search and rescue.
Everything they need to do out there.
Exactly, and participate more robustly in counter-piracy and anti-illegal fishing operations. It gives them the tools, basically, to exercise sovereignty over their maritime territory.
So it's really a multi-pronged approach then. Training personnel, providing direct operational support when needed, and crucially, equipping them with the physical assets required for long-term maritime security and domain awareness.
Spot on.
And this is all underpinned by Seychelles' perception of India as this stable, non-threatening, and trusted ally. This depth of cooperation and trust, it wasn't just built overnight, surely. It must have roots in specific historical events, including what sounds like a truly dramatic case study highlighted in the source material.
It certainly does. And this brings us neatly to Operation Flowers Are Blooming, a fascinating incident that really underscores the unique trust that developed between the two nations, even during a pretty turbulent period.
Okay, let's set the scene for this. Operation Flowers Are Blooming. The source material frames Seychelles during the Cold War as a hotly contested territory. Why was this small island nation so caught up in this superpower rivalry? Seems unlikely on the surface.
Its location, once again, was absolutely key. In the geostrategic chessboard of the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union were constantly looking for forward operating bases and points of influence in critical regions around the world.
Right.
The U.S. had a significant base on Diego Garcia, further south in the Indian Ocean. The USSR, in response, was actively seeking its own base to challenge that U.S. presence and project power in the region.
And Seychelles was right there.
Seychelles, sitting astride vital shipping lanes, became, well, a prime target for both superpowers looking for military basing rights.
So it was essentially squeezed between these two global giants wanting to establish a military footprint on its soil. Wow. But the material state Seychelles defended its territory very powerfully against these major powers trying to secure bases. That's a strong show of sovereign will for a young nation, isn't it?
It really speaks to a determined commitment to non-alignment and protecting its newfound independence from, becoming just a strategic pawn in their game. However, this period was also marked by internal political instability. The source mentions that following independence, the socialist leader Albert Rene came to power in 1977 via a military coup.
Right, the coup itself.
Yes, which created a complex internal dynamic of contested legitimacy and vulnerability to external interference or further coup attempts.
A coup right after independence certainly adds another layer of complexity. And the material indicates there were repeated attempts to remove Albert Rene after he took power. This domestic instability must have made the nation feel constantly under threat.
Absolutely. Constantly looking over its shoulder. And this vulnerability culminated in what the source describes as a most embarrassing situation in 1981.
Okay, what happened?
This involved a known figure, a South African Secret Service agent named Mike Hoare, often referred to as Mad Mike, from his mercenary activities in other parts of Africa.
Mad Mike. So this wasn't just some random individual. He was a known operative.
Yes, a notorious mercenary and intelligence figure. According to the material, Mike Hoare arrived in Seychelles under the guise of being like a businessman or maybe a tourist, part of a group.
Okay.
But his cover was blown almost immediately when Seychelles security discovered a huge cache of arms packed in his check-in baggage at the airport.
Wow, just like that. In his luggage.
Yep. A clear attempt to smuggle weapons into the country, presumably to facilitate a coup or some other destabilizing action.
And then, in a move that sounds like something straight out of a thriller, he hijacked a plane. Is that right?
Exactly. Cornered after his arms were discovered, Mike Hoare and his group hijacked an Air India plane, flight AI-707, which happened to be on the tarmac at Seychelles International Airport.
Unbelievable.
They forced the pilots to fly them and their remaining weapons to Johannesburg, South Africa. The material labels this most embarrassing for Seychelles, and you can see why a foreign agent managing to compromise the international airport, smuggle arms, at least partially, and then hijack an international flight. That's a significant breach of security and sovereignty.
Yeah, hugely embarrassing and worrying. So, facing repeated coup attempts and this high-profile incident involving a foreign operative and an international hijacking, President Albert Rene clearly felt the need for reliable security support. And the source material says he decided to turn to India for help in 1986.
This decision in 1986 is highly significant. It really demonstrates the depth of trust that had apparently developed between Rene's government and India since independence. He bypassed other potential partners, and specifically sought India's assistance to help put an end to the cycle of repeated coup attempts.
And India's response wasn't just diplomatic reassurance, it involved actual, actionable intelligence, according to the material.
Crucially, yes. The source recounts that in 1986, the RNAW station officer, that's India's External Intelligence Agency representative stationed in Seychelles,
RNAW, right,
provided President Rene with critical intelligence. The information was pretty explosive. His own defense minister, a figure named Colville, was planning a coup against him.
His own defense minister? Wow.
Yeah. This kind of intelligence, revealing a threat from within the highest levels of the Seychellois government, would have been absolutely invaluable, and it speaks volumes about India's intelligence-gathering capabilities at the time, and its willingness to share such sensitive information with a trusted partner.
How might India's intelligence agency have even uncovered such a plot? That's incredibly specific and sensitive information.
Well, the source doesn't elaborate on the specific methods, of course, but intelligence agencies employ a whole range of techniques. It could involve human intelligence, cultivating sources within the government or military,
Boots on the ground, essentially.
notably, or signals intelligence, perhaps monitoring communications. Given the established diplomatic ties and the ongoing defense cooperation between India and Seychelles, it's plausible that RNAW had developed the necessary networks and capabilities over the years to pick up on such sensitive internal machinations. The key thing is that India had the capability, and importantly, the trust was there to deliver this vital piece of information directly to the Seychelles president.
So President Rene receives this critical intelligence. What level of response did this trigger back in India? Must have set off some alarm bells.
The response was at the very highest levels. According to the material, Albert René's dialogue regarding this threat was directly with the then Indian PM. Now, the source mentions Indira Gandhi here in the context of 1986.
Right, but she passed away in '84.
Exactly. So there might be a slight discrepancy on the specific PM in the source, but the crucial point is that this request went right to the top political leadership in India, whoever was PM at that moment. The matter was then entrusted to Admiral R.H. Tahiliani, who was the chief of naval staff at the time, and senior RNAW officials.
Okay, so the Navy chief and RNAW.
Yes, it shows a coordinated high-level strategic response involving both the military and intelligence arms of the Indian state.
And together, the Indian Navy and RNAW devised this plan, codenamed Flowers Are Blooming, which, as you said, wasn't a plan for an invasion, but something far more subtle and, well, strategic.
It was indeed quite a masterclass in non-kinetic power projection and defense diplomacy. The plan, developed in close consultation, was ingenious. India would dispatch one of its warships, the INS Vindhyagiri, to Seychelles.
Right.
The ship's official purpose would be to participate in Seychelles' National Day celebrations, providing a perfectly legitimate reason for its presence, standard naval diplomacy.
Right, that's the cover story. What was the critical strategic move within this plan? The clever bit.
The clever twist was that upon arriving in Seychelles, the INS Vindhyagiri would plant a request to extend its stay beyond the planned celebrations.
Uh-huh.
The justification given would be a reported engineering defect on board requiring unexpected repairs or assessment in Seychelles waters. This would provide a plausible, if, fictional, reason for the ship to remain in Seychelles for an extended period, giving India the window it needed to execute the second part of the plan.
So the ship arrives, reports this convenient defect, and gets permission for an extended stay. What happens then? How does a naval ship simply sitting in a harbor prevent a coup by a defense minister? Seems counterintuitive.
This is where the subtle genius comes in. Over the next 12 days, the period of the INS Vindhyagiri's extended defect-related stay, the ship's presence wasn't passive. The material states that the deck of the INS Vindhyagiri was used for aggressive power projections.
Okay, aggressive power projections. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it wouldn't involve direct military action against potential coup plotters. Instead, think of what this could entail from a naval ship. Maybe prominent display of weaponry, very visible readiness of the crew, perhaps helicopter flights off the deck, high-profile visits by Seychelles officials to the ship's deck, conducting visible drills, even if they were simulated.
So it's a visual, undeniable demonstration of capability and readiness right there in Seychelles' main port, Port Victoria, presumably.
Exactly.
And who was the target audience for this aggressive power projection?
The material is explicit. The objective was to convey clear consequences of a coup directly to Defense Minister Colvey and anyone involved with him.
Right.
The presence of a large, capable Indian warship, known to be there at the request of the president, and, critically, likely aware of the internal political dynamics thanks to RNW's intelligence, sent a powerful message. It implied that any move by Colvey would not only face internal opposition, but would also occur under the very watchful eye of a powerful external partner, clearly willing to support the legitimate government.
So it makes the risks look much higher.
Precisely. The consequences could range from simply non-recognition by a key international partner like India, all the way to potential disruption of any attempted takeover. It was about shifting the risk calculus for the plotters, making the potential costs of a coup appear too high because of India's visible presence and implied support for Rene.
So it was basically a psychological operation backed by credible military presence. India wasn't engaging in direct combat, but using its naval power and intelligence liaison to create an environment where proceeding with the coup became just too risky.
Exactly. You've got it. And according to the source, the objective was successfully achieved. During or shortly after the INS Vindhyagiri's 12-day extended stay, Defense Minister Kilvi left Seychelles, and the planned coup was averted,
Wow.
all without a shot being fired by the Indian side.
That is an absolutely incredible story, a real-world example of how strategic presence and intelligence can achieve security objectives in incredibly nuanced, subtle ways. And the legacy of this successful non-military intervention appears to be pretty significant.
It is. The material notes that following this decisive assistance in averting the coup, India formally strengthened its commitment to Seychelles' long-term defense capabilities. In 1989, just a few years after Operation Flowers Are Blooming, India established the Seychelles Defense Academy.
Ah, so that specific moment of crisis response directly led to a lasting institution focused on building Seychelles' own indigenous defense capabilities. It really solidified the trust and deepened the defense partnership for decades to come, didn't it?
It's a powerful illustration of how specific historical events can forge deep bonds and lead to, institutionalized cooperation down the line.
Moving into the modern era, then, it's clear that Seychelles' strategic significance hasn't waned. The material brings us forward to a state visit by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2015, which marked a renewed high-level focus on the relationship.
Yeah, that visit was pivotal, reaffirming India's commitment to its Indian Ocean neighbors as part of its broader maritime strategy, sometimes called SEGER, security and growth for all in the region.
Right.
The material highlights that a key theme of the visit was bolstering the concept of the blue economy.
We hear that term blue economy a lot now. What does it specifically mean in the context of a nation like Seychelles? It must be critical for them.
Oh, absolutely critical. For Seychelles, you've got a land area of just over 450 square kilometers. Tiny, really, but an exclusive economic zone, EEZ, stretching over 1.3 million square kilometers.
Huge difference.
Massive. An area roughly 3,000 times its land size. So the blue economy is paramount. It's about sustainably managing and using their vast ocean resources for economic development. This includes critical traditional sectors like tourism, obviously, fisheries, tuna fishing is hugely important for them, and maritime transport.
Okay, usual suspects.
But it also looks towards new potential areas like marine renewable energy, maybe wind or wave power, aquaculture, marine biotechnology, and even potentially seabed resources in the future. India's focus on this means recognizing that Seychelles' future prosperity is fundamentally tied to its ocean and, importantly, offering assistance to develop these sectors sustainably.
So it's not just about fishing and tourism anymore. It's a much more comprehensive approach to leveraging ocean resources for national development, and India is aligning with that vision. The visit also yielded some concrete outcomes related to maritime security and awareness, according to the material.
Absolutely. One significant agreement mentioned was India helping Seychelles get a complete track of all naval ship movements in the region.
Okay, that sounds important.
It's a critical aspect of what's called maritime domain awareness, or MDA. For a nation with such a huge EEZ and legitimate concerns about illegal fishing, unauthorized movements, security threats, just knowing what is happening in their waters and the surrounding region is fundamental.
Right.
India's assistance likely involves providing technology, perhaps data sharing, or training to establish or enhance Seychelles' ability to monitor maritime traffic effectively.
So this goes beyond just seeing ships on a radar. It's about having intelligence on movements, identities, maybe even potential intentions, which is crucial for law enforcement and security.
Precisely. It gives Seychelles the eyes it needs to patrol its vast maritime territory more effectively, to deter illegal activities, and to respond to incidents when they happen. Another key outcome mentioned was a pact for undertaking a hydrographic survey.
Right, hydrographic survey. Why is that so important for an island nation? What does it involve?
A hydrographic survey is essentially mapping the underwater world, the depth, the shape of the seabed, the location of underwater hazards like rocks or wrecks, coastlines, tides, currents, all of it.
Okay, foundational data.
Exactly. For a maritime nation, this is foundational infrastructure. Accurate hydrographic charts are absolutely essential for safe navigation of ships, whether they're commercial vessels, fishing boats, or naval ships. They're needed for planning port development, managing coastal zones, supporting offshore activities, even understanding marine ecosystems. Without up-to-date surveys, maritime activities are just riskier and less efficient. India's help here is providing a critical piece of maritime infrastructure expertise.
Makes sense. Beyond the strategic maritime and economic initiative, the visit also included a people-to-people element, didn't it?
Yes, the material notes the provision of a 3-month free visa on arrival for citizens of Seychelles visiting India. Now, while that might seem small compared to defense pacts,
Yeah.
initiatives like this are actually quite important for fostering tourism, educational exchanges, cultural connections. It eases travel for Seychelles citizens, many of whom, as we'll discuss, have family or cultural ties to India, reinforcing the human dimension of the relationship.
So the modern engagement under the Modi visit reinforced the strategic focus, embracing concepts like the blue economy, providing practical capabilities like maritime domain awareness and hydrographic surveys, and also fostering personal connections. And these defense ties continue to be managed through formal ongoing structures, I gather.
They are. The material highlights the importance of the Joint Defense Coordination Committee, which has apparently been in place since 2001.
Since 2001, okay.
Yeah, this committee serves as a high-level mechanism for both sides to discuss security issues, coordinate strategy, and importantly, oversee the regular joint military exercises between the Indian and Seychelles forces.
And the material mentions a specific exercise, Lamity 2016.
Yes, Lamity is the name given to the joint exercise series, and 2016 saw the 7th iteration of it. It was held in Victoria, Seychelles in February 2016. The name itself is significant. L'amitié means friendship in Seychelles Creole.
Ah, nice touch.
Yeah, symbolizing the spirit of cooperation. The material notes that this particular exercise included anti-piracy simulations, which directly jays back to that shared security challenge we talked about earlier and shows the practical application of the joint training and coordination still very relevant.
So the modern era sees this deepening of engagement across strategic maritime areas, economic development focused on the blue economy, practical capacity building through surveillance and surveying, and continuous defense cooperation guided by joint committees and exercises like Lamity, all building on that historical foundation of trust we discussed.
It's a relationship that has clearly grown in complexity and scope over the years, reflecting the evolving strategic landscape of the Indian Ocean.
Let's expand a bit further then on the broader areas of cooperation mentioned in the material, including what sounds like a particularly noteworthy infrastructure project.
Right. This is the case study of the Assumption Islands Infrastructure Development Rights Agreement, also highlighted from around 2015. The material locates Assumption Islands as part of the Aldabra Group, covering about 11.74 square kilometers. Small place.
And the material adds that unique detail. These islands are very popular among scientists who come to study the giant tortoises at Aldabra Islands. That gives them a specific ecological significance, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The Aldabra Atoll, which includes nearby Assumption Island, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and hosts this vast population of giant tortoises. Conservation there is globally important.
Right.
And the material states that India gained infrastructure development rights, IDR, on Assumption Island.
Okay, infrastructure development rights. What exactly did this agreement entail in terms of physical infrastructure development by India? What were they going to build?
The material is quite specific about what India would help establish or refurbish on the island under this IDR. This included building a new jetty terminal.
For ships.
Yes. Refurbishing the existing airstrip.
For planes.
And establishing a forward base for the Seychelles Coast Guard equipped with modern facilities.
So this is really about upgrading access sea and air and establishing a functional base for the Seychelles security forces on this remote island group. And the material highlights dual benefits from this project. What are they?
Well, the first benefit mentioned is directly related to that ecological significance we just talked about. It will equip Seychelles with more power to help protect the tortoise species in the region. Well, improved transportation links, like the jetty and airstrip, and a permanent Coast Guard presence allow for better monitoring of the surrounding marine and island environment. It helps deter illegal activities like poaching or unauthorized landings, and it facilitates research and conservation efforts in the very sensitive Aldabra area.
That makes sense. Better infrastructure and presence help protect that unique environment.
Yeah.
What's the other side of the coin, though? The second stated benefit.
The material states quite clearly that this development will also allow India to exert geopolitical influence in the oceanic region.
Ah, okay. The strategic angle.
Exactly. This acknowledges the strategic reality of India's involvement. By developing infrastructure on a strategically located island like Assumption, India gains enhanced logistical capability and potentially a point for operational turnaround or increased maritime domain awareness in the southwestern Indian Ocean. It provides India with a potential node for projecting presence or supporting its maritime security interests in that part of the region.
So it's framed as a project that serves Seychelles' conservation and security needs while simultaneously enhancing India's strategic reach and influence. This really highlights how development assistance can be, well, carefully structured to align both partners' interests, even if those interests operate on different scales or have different primary goals.
It's a clear example of strategic infrastructure development, yes. And beyond this specific island project, the material details other areas of broader economic and developmental cooperation, too.
Right, what kind of economic links are there?
Well, the material mentions India extending lines of credit to Seychelles. These are essentially concessional loans provided by India to help fund specific development projects or initiatives in Seychelles, sort of like development aid, but as loans.
Okay.
India also provides assistance in skill training through the ITEC program, that's the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. It offers training courses in various fields for professionals from partner countries, helping build human capacity in Seychelles.
And Indian businesses have a notable presence there too.
Yes, the material specifically names several long-standing or prominent Indian businesses operating there. The Bank of Baroda, for instance, has had a presence since 1978.
Wow, that's a long time.
It indicates a long history of financial connectivity. In the automobile sector, Tata and Ashok Leyland are mentioned, suggesting Indian vehicles are common there. And in telecommunications, Airtel operates in Seychelles. These examples show a pretty diverse range of Indian commercial engagement contributing to the Seychelles economy.
And there's also mention of health connectivity. How does that work?
Yes, the material notes the provision of hospital connectivity under the RAN Africa e-Network project. This typically involves using satellite communication technology to link hospitals in African partner countries, including island states like Seychelles, with specialized hospitals in India.
Ah, telemedicine.
Exactly. Facilitating telemedicine consultations, remote diagnostics, even medical education. It's a form of digital development assistance, leveraging India's expertise in IT and healthcare.
Finally, the material touches on the deep cultural and people-to-people ties, highlighting a significant demographic link. This seems quite important too.
This is perhaps the most organic connection, you could say. The material points out that approximately 8% of Seychelles' population are descendants of Indians.
8%, okay.
Yeah, this historical migration has created a natural and enduring link between the two countries at a really fundamental human level.
And the material suggests this demographic link leads to culture and values that are commonly shared and nurtured. What does that imply?
It means the relationship isn't purely transactional or just strategic. There's this underlying layer of shared heritage, maybe customs, food, cultural practices, and just general understanding that facilitates cooperation and provides a warm backdrop for the official relations. You know, festivals, food, maybe language elements, family ties. They create a bridge between the two nations that adds real depth to the partnership across all sectors.
So looking at this broader cooperation, we see India involved in significant infrastructure projects like Assumption Island, with clear dual benefits, providing financial and human resource development assistance through things like lines of credit and ITEC, maintaining a presence through key businesses like Bank of Baroda and Tata, leveraging technology for health connections, and all of this built upon a strong foundation of cultural ties and shared heritage from the Indian diaspora.
It really paints a picture of a comprehensive relationship, doesn't it? Where the strategic and defense ties, while central, are complemented and supported by these deeper economic, developmental, and cultural links.
So to recap this deep dive, based on the source material we've been working through, we've journeyed from Seychelles' colonial past and India's, well, immediate recognition of its independence back in 1976, tracing the steps that built this relationship. We've seen how defense cooperation emerged as the absolute cornerstone, involving continuous training, crucial counter-piracy support, and even the gifting of vital maritime assets like patrol boats.
And we explored that really remarkable historical episode, Operation Flowers Are Blooming, where India deployed this brilliant, subtle strategy of intelligence-backed defense diplomacy using a naval ship's presence to help Seychelles avert a coup. That really demonstrated the unique trust forged between the two nations and led directly to lasting institutions like the Seychelles Defense Academy.
And we looked at the modern era, too, highlighting India's renewed focus on strategic maritime areas, particularly the blue economy, and providing critical capabilities like maritime domain awareness and hydrographic surveying essential tools for an island nation. We also delved into those significant infrastructure projects like the one proposed for Assumption Island, which clearly serve both Seychelles' developmental and environmental needs and India's strategic interests in the region. A real balancing act there.
And we saw that this robust strategic and security relationship is supported by these broader layers of economic assistance, trade presence through Indian companies, health connectivity via e-networks, and crucially, those deep cultural and people-to-people ties stemming from the significant Indian diaspora in Seychelles.
It's absolutely evident that Seychelles, despite its physical size, holds a disproportionate strategic importance, particularly for India. And India has cultivated a relationship that is deep, multifaceted, and fundamentally built on trust, especially in the defense and security realm, as our source material has vividly demonstrated. Understanding this specific partnership really helps you illuminate broader dynamics in international relations, doesn't it?
It really does.
The interplay of geography and strategy, the diverse tools nations use to build influence and ensure security, and the complex, often mutually beneficial relationships that can develop between larger and smaller states in strategically vital regions like the Indian Ocean.
It's a compelling case study in how all those diverse elements of statecraft defense, diplomacy, development, culture combine.
So, thinking about all this, considering the detailed history of India's defense support, from those direct interventions like Operation Flowers or Ballooning, right through to the long-term capacity building via training and infrastructure on strategically located islands. How might this deep embedded level of trust and practical assistance position India as a key security partner going forward? And, maybe more broadly, how might it reshape the future balance of power and the whole maritime security architecture in this strategically vital Indian Ocean region? It's definitely a question worth reflecting on based on everything we've unpacked today.
Indeed, the ripple effects from a relationship this deep, particularly in that location, they could be significant.
Absolutely. And that wraps up this deep dive.